Welcome to another edition of the TiE University Ask Me Anything. Today we're talking with Amy Henry of TiE Houston. She's a charter member in the Houston chapter. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Karl. I'm glad to be here.
There you go. We're very happy to have you. We know you've got a very strong background in entrepreneurship, investing, number of different things. And so we're looking forward to learning more about your experience and your advice for the students.
No, I'm looking very much to this because I think it's very important for those of us who've had these great opportunities and experiences to pay it forward and to give back, right? And to share it with another generation. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things with your background that I saw was, you've got a CPA background, so strong financial background. So maybe it would be helpful to tell us a little bit about the importance of knowing your numbers.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Yeah. People say, oh, wow, you talk a lot for a CPA, right? So not all, first I'll just debunk that myth. Okay, not all CPAs are introverts, right?
Right.
But I do love numbers, right? And I mean, why I personally love numbers is it's a balancing equation, right? There is some very logic and fundamentals to it. So the importance of numbers. So I work with startups, obviously at Eunike. So we work with companies very early stage, but we predominantly work at them as kind of when they have a minimal viable product. So we help them with their pitch decks, right? I also invest in these companies. And also then we also then bring in other VCs to work with these companies, external VCs and corporate CVCs, as we call them. The number one issue always is numbers, right? And so, I mean, I really don't, in a lot of times, I don't blame, right? So typically a lot of, small businesses, startups, that's not their background, right? They're not comfortable. They haven't, been involved in creating financial statements or cash flows, or they see all these terms that these venture capital investors want to see, or even my customers will ask me, right? So they wait and they put it off to the last minute, right? They really need to start working on their economics and financials from the very, very beginning, right? And so I kind of laid out kind of, three kind of common statements I usually get from people. I've got too many uncertainties, right? I can't do numbers because there's too many unknowns, right? Okay, that's never a good answer. Okay, I'm gonna tell you what not to say. Whatever I present will be wrong, yes? And I get that. It usually is, right? And everyone, the audience always understands that, right? So I want to see the logic, right? How do you approach, how you would run your business from a numeric standpoint? Is it economical? What are you thinking, right? You can be completely wrong, and you can have the right foundations and thought process for this, right? Which makes me feel comfortable either as your customer or an investor. And, and then people are like, well, people are going to hold me to it. What happens if I'm wrong? And then everyone's going to hold me accountable, right? So, my advice is you don't have to be the numbers person, right? And I've seen this at many times with different companies, right? Go for mentors who can help you with that, right? Get someone on your team that's going to be that strong person. So we see a lot of times when companies present, the CEO will maybe present the hard technical, and founder, the aspects of it, and then they have a financial person to step in, right? But someone on your team needs to have those numbers in place. It's kind of like, we always procrastinate. Everyone procrastinates. I do it. I even procrastinate my taxes. I'm probably one of the latest file on CPA. They say doctors are the worst patients, saying the same thing holds with CPAs.
Right. It's cobbler has no shoes, right? You're doing everybody else's.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes real. I mean, when I see a pitch deck, it becomes really, really clear whether I can tell whether someone has spent a lot of time and thought into looking at the economics of their company that they're setting up. It really does, And so, I'm okay with someone who struggles. You can see they're really trying to grasp that financial. I mean, they're giving it their all. I think, I can work with that person. I can try to find, how do we find mentors and people to support them, to help them strengthen that aspect, of their pitch or their business or their presentation. So please don't procrastinate. The financials are just important as everything else in your business, right? But, and then I kind of, laid out, it's about, confidence, right? So if I'm sitting and, listening to you talk about your business, whatever it is, if it's a service, I don't care if you're running a beauty salon, if you're looking for someone to invest in your business, do I feel like I can trust you? Do you have the ability to deliver, right? Do you understand the risks that are in your business, right? We understand that you're going to be wrong, but the financials are just an outcome of everything else about your business. They're just the end result. So
got to get to the bottom line somehow, right?
Yeah. And then I look at it is, okay, listen, if I'm talking to a person, can I supplement it? And are you the type of person that's going to be willing to take advice from someone? So if I can get a financial person in to help you develop your financial model, right? Are you going to listen? Or are you just going to still be stubborn and try to do it on your own? But numbers are, I've seen many startups not get funded purely because of financials.
Wow.
I see it a lot. Right.
What I think I'm hearing from you is both the numbers are important, but the numbers are also a way to kind of look into that person and get to know the people better. Is that a reasonable statement?
It is. If I'm selling a product, it goes to me how I'm thinking, how many units am I going to sell, right? What am I going to price those units at, right? How much is it going to cost me? Am I going to have to market those? There's also the cost. I'm going to have to market this product, right? So all of that.
Yeah. That's a great way to understand it. Good. Yes, I understand. Well, good. Now, one of the things that I think is a challenge another challenge besides the numbers these days is, the kind of mix of entrepreneurs out there. And, I think I've seen statistics that, the majority of kind of tech startup entrepreneurs tends to be kind of the white and male. And what do you think about the opportunities particularly for women entrepreneurs at this point?
Oh, I think it's good. Now I'm saying this as probably close to now it's probably 30 years veteran of the oil and gas industry, right? So, and that has always been pretty much a male dominated industry. But I never thought about that. That wasn't a huge issue. But and when I was thinking about this, because I probably have a slightly different. It just depends on your lens, right? Because when you think about diversity and women, so some of my background, I worked for Royal Dutch Shell for a number of years, and I spent a good portion of my career there. I also worked for EY, Big Four kind of consulting. And in both those companies, I worked with female leadership, right? So having visible female leaders, now I may have just been a lucky one, right? It just, that was my experience. This is, I say, people look at this from a different lens, right?
Right.
So I saw women leaders. I had, Shell was really big on mentors. I sat on Shell's diversity global team, and we did a lot of studies. Shell did a lot of studies of why do we lose our female engineers? Is it because of the glass ceiling? What are the other factors? What can we do? We had kind of a lot of these discussions. What do we need? What do we mean by diversity, right? And inclusion. What is it that we're looking for? And there's a lot that goes into this, right? And it goes also into how we were raised, and who we're exposed to. How many different religions have you been exposed to? Different countries, different cultures and norms. But I'll argue I could push in and have a whole group of women, right? Even on a business. But if we all think the same, do I really have diversity, right? And so I think it goes in how do we creating the opportunities for women, giving them the tools to succeed, right? Creating those pathways. And then kind of on top of that, it's the mentorship. So I was, again, I was really lucky because I had really, really strong mentors at Shell, right? And that was just part of their mantra and what they did. But, I think we also forget to look at small businesses. If you look at small business creation, it is women that are leading the numbers when you talk about small business creation, right? So, I mean, I would look at the numbers and argue that, maybe not as many women founders are funded by, say, venture capital, but when it comes to small business, they use some of the tools like, the SBA loans, right? And these other, micro grants and other, and there's more and more kind of micro financial institutions providing these investment options into women. Now, I think historically, and this I'll tie it into TiE, it's about encouraging women going into STEM programs, right? So, I mean, I'm on the energy side, and it's very science and technology focused. And so if I were to take a step back and look at it, I do see female entrepreneurs, but I don't see as many. But then it's also then how many women are actually represented in that technical community, right? And then I could take a completely different step back. And I was just thinking about this because I've got 3 teenagers. I got one going off to college, another one's going off next year, got 2 girls and 1 boy. But, I think about how are we raised, right? We always encourage boys to be, take the risk. See them climbing up a tree or, doing something crazy on a skateboard and bike, I remember my younger brother, like Evil Knievel. And we encourage that, right? But, if we see I do this too, right? Young girl, don't do that. You're going to get hurt, So at a very young age, we kind of create this, right? So it starts at a very young age, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because if I look now forward, a lot of the Fortune 500 and others are recruiting females onto boards, right? And it's not because they want to have females as a numeric representative. Okay, yeah, there's some that do it. So I was talking to a few, and I said, okay, listen, I'm not really up for this. I don't like this, right? Because I don't like to see you just saying, I got my female number, I've ticked the box. And the response was, no, that's not what we're doing. So these are, high-level recruitment forms that do search roles for boards. And they said, our boards have realized that when we have discussions, they take on a different dimension. There's a different component when we have female executives in the room. And so they like that, right? And so that's the reason. So, that's kind of where, is finding, and when I say mentorship, it doesn't have to be just women, right? Mm-hmm. It really doesn't, because I think it's getting more senior level executives to be able to coach and mentor and share their experiences, right? Some of it has to do with how do you guide a large organization if you're doing that? How do you guide the politics, the communication styles, right? And again, and like at Shell, I'll say, we had a professional development plan. There's, every year you set targets and goals and measurables, this whole SMART thing, going back from the McKinseys that have gone through these companies, right? But then you also had an individual development plan. And what that meant was, what did you want to do individually in your own personal life, right? To develop yourself. It could have been like, I want to go run a marathon, or I want to go and get a graduate degree, right? So Shell, that was part of your whole measurement, right? Did you do things professionally? And did you actually do those things personally that you wanted to achieve, right? So I think these things are really important. And then I had a father who was very stressed on education, right? So I think, you've got to find those that are real champions. My father's in his 80s now, he was just, just don't worry about getting married, all of this, focus on the job. You got to support yourself. You got to stand on your own 2 feet. You know, I would say he's probably my biggest mentor, right? Even though he's generationally, he's from he was born in the 30s, right? He comes from the area of, you know, we're going to get married, have kids, stay home, cook, clean. So I think it's so many factors, but I think it's about getting our people who have had successful careers, right, to give back and pay it forward, right? And I think that's really what we need to do at times. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So I'm hearing a lot of it starts early, so developmental, but kind of as an action item, you know, get good mentors from, you know, whatever, you know, no matter the gender.
Yeah, and I would say I listen, even today. I mean, I still run into, you know, subtle chauvinistic comments and stuff. You know, you're gonna have to learn, you know. But what I tell teams, right? And even this is what I had to do. And actually, I've learned this from senior male executives, right? Is you've got to learn how others perceive you or may perceive you. And you've got to figure out how you use that to your advantage, right? Okay. And you're just going to have, if I go into a certain audience, yeah, I know they're going to think, you know, okay, there's a woman, right? And they're probably not going to think, you know, they'll probably make certain assumptions, but that's okay, right? But you have to know that and how to use that to your advantage, right? So I've got to we've got to figure out how to mentor them, because it can have a pendulum swing the other way, because you do not want to create women with kind of a victim mentality, right? You know, you want to be able to create really strong leaders that have merit in their own right? So that, I mean, that's really what I'm focused on.
Great. Well, that kind of makes me think, you know, that's great advice, you know, be strong in your own right, understand how you're perceived. And, you know, if an entrepreneur is going out for investment, I would assume those same kind of pieces of advice would be applicable. Is that reasonable? Yeah.
We even do it because my co-founder is my husband, and it depends on our audience, okay, and who it is that we may be having to deal with, of who presents, right? And some of it goes into the female-male factor. I mean, I know people say, "Oh, that's not really great," but it is. I mean, that goes into it, right? At the end of the day, right? Of who's probably going to be the best person to lead that. This has nothing to do with our capabilities. It also has to do with who's going to make a better connection with that audience, right?
That's right. Makes sense. And what are some other factors that you look for as an investor?
So many, but I mean,
Sure.
really, for the big one, at the end of the day, it really is about the team. For me, it's the person, it's the story, right? And I'm not telling people go out and create a story. Okay, do not go. Come on. You know, I want to know why you're doing this, right? I really want to know, why are you in this, right? Which tells me, listen, you know, we can all talk how hard it is to be a small business owner, an entrepreneur. It is brutal. It is tough. You got to have a lot of stamina, right? So, you know, part of one of these, what's motivated you to do this, right? To jump into this, you know, this risk of failure, right? The risk is high, right? My father was a serial entrepreneur aside from being a veterinarian. And I swore up and down that I would never, ever be an entrepreneur. So I am what I call a reluctant entrepreneur. Okay? Because I know what it's like, right? As a kid growing up, you have really high points and you have really low points, right? And you know, you're working 7 days a week, right? I mean, you know, the joke in our house growing up was, I have a really mean boss, right? Because, you know, you're your own boss, right? You have to work all the time. But, you know, I really look for, why are they doing this, right? You know, do I think they have it? I also kind of look to see kind of what kind of support system do they have? You know, do they have a fully built team, right? Because it is very emotional and stressful in this thing, but also because of the risk of failure, it goes down to your non-technical risk a lot of times at the end of the day when it comes to some of the technology that we look at, right? Of course, we look at, your value proposition, are you actually solving a real problem? Is this a nice to have? Do you understand your competitor landscape, right? Do you have the ability to execute on this? Do you have the team, or do you understand what kind of team you need to have? Doesn't mean you have to have a team now, right? But do you have any indication of what it's going to take to fully execute? And, especially from an investor standpoint, you're going to really look at the commerciality, right? And the time it takes to get there, right? So, at the end of the day, we probably weight 60 to 70% of our decision on a person, because one, we look at, are they going to work well? Can they play? It's kind of back to this whole preschool, kindergarten thing. Can they play well with others, right? Are they going to be able to get along with the customers, or are they going to, it's going to be like, water and vinegar here. They're going to be very divisive and cause, and can they pivot? I mean, you're going to have to pivot all the time. Again, I tell these startups, I never ask you to do anything that I haven't had to do myself. So some comments are like, oh, I shouldn't have to jump through all these hoops, right? I'm like, I'm 50 now. I'm still jumping through hoops every day. I mean, I have to working with these large energy companies, right? So, are they willing to do that, right? Can they take coaching, right? They don't have to listen to everything I said. They're like my kids, right? I mean, you can go 1 year, but are you going to actually listen and process it and kind of synthesize it really and give it some real thought, and then take in some, and I'm going to see, some sort of shift or change from you, right? So, I mean, I think I'm going to copy Ram Shenoy, the president of Houston TiE, okay? Because he said this with a startup we were working with, and I love this, right? It's simple, and he was telling a startup we were working with it's not about what you think your risk, it's all about perception. Right. How do people perceive the risk that you pose, right? Is whether they're going to be your customer or, an investor. At the end of the day, perception is everything. So you have to figure out, how do you manage that perception that others have of you? I know it's a lot, right? But I mean, but every investor looks at these different ways, right? Right. Some don't invest in the team. So there are investors that say, I'm more interested in the technology, right? I can go in, and some will say, I can go in and I can put a team in, right? But others will say, I'd rather work with a good team. I can make money off of a good team, even if the technology is mediocre, so long as I have a commercial market, right? Right. So that's why I say, don't try to kind of sell out and try to be someone that you're not in front of an investor, because it's a long-term, very long-term relationship you're going to have. Right.
So one of the themes I'm kind of picking up on, through the numbers, through the, the gender, through the investment is, how people think. Yeah. And exactly. How they make decisions. Yeah. And how adaptable they are, I guess, be one way to phrase it.
Yeah. Are you adaptable? Are you agile? Right.
So would that be one of the key skills? Would there be other skills you might suggest people, try and develop?
Yeah, I really would. I mean, I think the younger generation today, of course, is not from, I'm not calling myself an old person by any means, right? I'm still, I'm not going there. No. Right. But, but in absolute terms, right, people were typically lifetime employment, or maybe you would be working for 2 companies, 3 max, over your career. But that really doesn't, we have a very mobile workforce. We have a global economy. We see now everyone post-COVID, no one wants to go back to work, So it's very different. So back in the days when, my personal experience when Shell rotated us. And so you were expected even if you are on finance commercial side, you're expected to learn enough about almost every discipline, right? Enough to be dangerous, right? So you had to understand a bit about drilling. You had to know a little bit about completions. You have to at the end of the day. So you're dangerous enough you can talk about the subject, right? Part of the reason. The second one is your ability to understand the company and the way it works from a macro and micro level. However, at the same time, the expectation was, and the same thing was with E&Y, right? So people are like, how do I become a partner, right? And I just want to be a partner. I want to do the whining, dining. I want to just, have these discussions. But at the end of the day, you need to have one core skill set, right? Who are people going to come to you as the subject matter expert, right? In this area, you have to have one core. So of course, when I was at Shell, it was more finance commercial. However, I had to know stuff about tax. I had to know stuff about legal. I had to read field development plans, so you have to be a very well-rounded person, right? And I think given that there is no one job, you have to do that. So in the rotating at Shell, when we did it, you had to compete internally for jobs. So every 2-3 years, you had to apply for a job, and it was competitive application. And if you didn't have a skill set, you got stuck. They sent you off to this business continuity bill, right? And that means, your skills, you didn't have the relevant skill set the company was needing from you, or that those jobs weren't available, right? And so they gave you time to kind of add new skill sets. So you constantly have to add to your skill set and your inventory, That's what I tell young people. But you must be an expert. You must have something, one core, right? Expertise. It doesn't do me any good to be a jack of all trades, right? So I think that's one thing that people have got to really understand. And I think the other thing I would encourage is work on people skills and personal relationships. Because at the end of the day, and Shell even did this. We took people with liberal arts majors and brought them into the business and trained them right. I can teach anyone technical skills. I can teach people how to be an accountant. Maybe they won't be the best accountant, but I can teach that, right? But when it comes to, interacting, developing personal relationships, right? Understanding those softer skills, speaking clearly, can you articulate, So I think a skill inventory that I will pull from my Shell days is influencing through others, right? So you may, Shell's big company, you have all these spaghetti matrix about who reports where. And so a lot of times, in order to get things done, doesn't mean you had a mandate, like I am the person, so you must listen to me, right? You had to work with other people and other organizations, both internally and externally, and you have to help figure out how do you influence them, how do you get them to work with you and buy into whatever it is you want to execute, right? And I think these skill sets that are extremely valuable.
That's great. That's great. So for a university student, any tips on, how they might start that at that point in their career?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I wrote a list. Right? I wish I could have a do-over, right? That's number one. You won't get a do-over, okay? Right? So the thing that I say right now is take risks, right? Take risks. If you and I've seen children of friends of ours who've done this, right? You're young enough to take risks, okay? You're not going to get behind, okay? So while in college, halfway through, you decide this is not my passion, right? You really think about it. You still have time. You're young enough to do that, right? So that I really encourage that. I think belonging to organizations or where you can work on your speaking capabilities, right, is very good. Or areas where it is not your, I call comfortable spot or your sweet spot, right? I would say internship. Practical experience is worth more. I'm not going to say grades aren't important, but if I had to compare a resume, If someone who had just like stellar grades, but no practical experience, I take practical experience trumps for me personally, every time. And I say, start developing your network. Now is the time. You've got great opportunities with your, if you're going to school with your professors, you'll have different organizations, companies come in, companies sponsor. It's not too soon to start developing that network of yours so that, as you go out, you have that. And then my thing is kind of be a part of a club or something on campus, learn from others. Because you need to be with people that look at things from a different lens, right? And that's how you learn through others. I mean, part of our model is why do we collaborate with energy companies? They want to sit around and discuss technology and innovation. Why? Because Equinor will say, I want to see how Hess looks at it because they look at things differently than I do. Maybe I'm missing something. What can I learn from them and just having a conversation? And this happens, right? This really, really happens.
Yep.
That I'm missing, right? And bring it in because we all have our own internal biases, right? So I'm not saying you're never going to shake your internal biases, but I think, doing something that's out of your depth is a great practical experience. I like to see when people take risks, right?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Those are my big pieces of words. Yeah.
It would seem that doing something kind of out of your depth, dealing with that uncertainty in a kind of safer environment might prepare you well for doing a startup later.
No, it would. It really would.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, I hate speaking. No, I don't really hate speaking, but when I first had to do it and I had to do it a lot, I would just get so nervous, right? I mean, I just really was not comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's these things that you're not comfortable with that are not in your comfort zone are actually maybe some of the things that you're really, really good at, right? And you're not going to know unless you try it.
Right. Right. Yeah. I still remember my first public speaking experience was, it was not a glorious success, but I've also met people that the first time they spoke publicly, they were like, oh, this is fun, and just didn't realize it, until they were 30 or something, like, oh, I wonder why I'd never done this before. And they were just kind of naturals at it. So you never know. Never know.
No, I mean, and you can see people and they're like, oh, but they look, it's so easy for them, right? I mean, I still get nervous, right? I mean, I still, heart will race sometimes, I mean, not as much anymore, right? Because, do it, you kind of do it for so long, you kind of get used to it. But it is, we all get nervous, right? It's just as nervous the first time.
Yeah, well, a certain amount of nerves is good. It keeps you, focused, attentive, and
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a balance in there somewhere, I think.
But I do believe of this generation, really, I think those that are going to be extremely successful are going to be those that have the ability to make human connections, right? I'm saying this, I got 3 teenagers, right? And I got TikTok, Instagram. We got this whole, you're old, you're uncool mom kind of thing going on in the house. But, great, we've got all this digital stuff coming out. We've got new ways of working coming out. But it's still, at the end of the day, we still have to have that human connection. So for the younger generation, those that are able to do that are going to be the ones that are going to be successful going forward.
I think that's great insight. I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Well, good. Well, university students are obviously, going to be fascinated by your discussion here. How could, they get more? Are you able to do some mentoring?
Yeah, so I'll definitely do the mentoring. So I'm going to be setting up my profile and information so that they can, connect with me. And part of my role is I do real work, but part of my job is kind of to pay back, right? And I think it's important, right? To pay back and pay for the things that you've been kind of gifted with, right? At the end of the day. So definitely open to the mentoring. So I'll be setting up my profile, right? And I don't know if Ravi even knows this, right? So I'm going to do a little prompt for our community college. I went to community college, right? I am
Really?
actually a product of HCC. Didn't know
Oh,
this, right?
excellent.
Let's see, but I had to work, right? And so I had to work and I had to put myself to school. And then I went to University of Houston. So I don't want people to think because you go to community college, it's a bad thing. Because then after that, I went and I have a Juris Doctorate in law. And then after that, I have a postgraduate diploma from Oxford University or Side Business School in the UK. So I want to say, don't knock out, the early days, right? That does not mean that you can't and won't be a successful person, right? It's about you can learn anywhere, right? It's a question of whether you're going to learn and take that on into the next phase of your journey. See, something new you didn't know about me, did you?
I've learned several things today. This is, I really enjoy these conversations, and,
Yeah.
that's, it's a great way to, learn more about people, like you say, make a human connection. And I think, the mentoring is a great way, for the university students to get that opportunity to make a connection with somebody who's outside their normal kind of day to day.
And I have to admit, if I'm really honest, right, I actually get more from mentoring, truly. I mean, than they probably get, because when you do this, you learn more about yourself that you don't realize until you actually having to either teach someone or mentor someone, right? And or you're like, oh, I had that skill set. I didn't know I had that. Wow, and you kind of refresh your own toolkit that you have, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want people to think, oh, I'm taking so much from someone who's offering their time. We do get something back from it as well, right?
Right.
And it makes me excited to see where people are successful or where we can help people achieve. So
Right.
I say just take advantage of it, right?
It's a real good point, and people can go to www.tieuniversity.org to find mentors like yourself and get connected. So I appreciate what you're saying there. I absolutely feel the same way. Your kind of comments earlier about how people think, and I find that when I have these conversations with students, that it makes me kind of reflect on some of my assumptions that I'm making and my own thought processes. So I really enjoy it and feel like I get a lot out of it too. So it's
So this
fantastic.
was fun. This is great. I enjoyed this.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Amy. We
And thank
really
you.
enjoyed it. Yeah. And
And I will get my profile set up and people can come find me. Yeah? Thank you.
yes, everybody's welcome to do so. So thank you again, and we'll wrap up our session today, and have a great evening.
Thanks to both of you, and students. You can find both Karl Maier and Dr. Amy Henry on the TiE University platform. Thank you so much for both of you. This is very insightful, appreciated, and looking forward to many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi.